The morning after the storm was a blur of mud, fallen branches, and scattered debris. In the quiet town of Harper's Ridge, Texas, the aftermath was visible everywhere: fences torn down, roofs battered, and fields flooded. Yet, amidst the chaos, one small farmhouse stood out, not because it was untouched, but because of the stubborn determination radiating from the old couple who lived there. Mr. and Mrs. Harris, both in their 70s, moved slowly but deliberately, their hands steady despite the fatigue etched into their faces. Waterlogged boards were stacked neatly by the porch, and a tarp flapped against the broken roof, secured with whatever they could find in the debris. The couple had lived on that land for more than 40 years, and every storm, every hardship, had only strengthened their resolve. Even after this one, with its ferocious winds and heavy rain, they refused to let it defeat them. Mr. Harris, tall and wiry despite his age, carried soaked timber from the yard to the half-collapsed roof, his knees protesting with every step. Mrs. Harris, wearing her faded overalls and a bandana to hold back her silver hair, hammered nails into boards with a rhythm that seemed almost musical, though the notes were punctuated by the distant cries of birds displaced by the storm. They worked silently, communicating with nods and glances, as if decades of shared struggle had replaced the need for words. From the horizon, a dust cloud marked the arrival of Jackson Reed, one of the wealthiest ranchers in the county. His expansive ranch had suffered damage too, but he had crews and insurance to handle it. Unlike the Harrises, Jackson could have repaired everything within days, but what drew him here was curiosity, mixed with a strange, unspoken respect for their resilience. He slowed his truck as he approached the farmhouse, the gravel crunching under his tires. From behind the wheel, he watched the couple move with a grace that contradicted their age. Every motion spoke of experience, of countless hours of hard labor that had made them nearly inseparable from the land they loved. Jackson's heart swelled with a mixture of admiration and uncertainty. Should he stop and offer help, or let them continue? He knew from his own life that pride was a powerful thing. The Harrises' pride, however, seemed inseparable from their courage. As he parked the truck a few yards away, the wind tugged at his coat, carrying the scent of wet earth and pine. He stepped out, boots sinking slightly into the soft mud, and squinted toward the couple. Mr. Harris lifted a soaked board onto his shoulder, while Mrs. Harris adjusted a sagging section of the roof. Their eyes met Jackson's from a distance, wary but unafraid. For a moment, Jackson just stood there, silent, taking it all in. The storm had left destruction in its wake, yet here was a testament to human perseverance. Two people, decades older than him, rebuilding what nature had tried to take away. The air was thick with the scent of rain, the sound of hammering, and the quiet determination that seemed to radiate from every corner of the old farmhouse. Something about this scene tugged at Jackson's conscience. He realized that this wasn't just about rebuilding a home, it was about preserving a legacy, a life's work, and a spirit that refused to break. Jackson hesitated at the edge of the yard, his boots sinking slightly into the mud as he surveyed the Harrises' progress. The sight of the elderly couple, soaked and exhausted yet unwavering, stirred a mix of admiration and unease in him. He knew he could rebuild their farmhouse in a single day if he chose, his wealth and resources making it trivial. But watching them now, he felt an odd sense that interfering might somehow diminish what they had accomplished so far. Still, curiosity, and a growing concern for their safety, propelled him forward. "Morning," he called out, his voice tentative but carrying across the yard. Mr. Harris paused mid-step, holding a heavy timber over his shoulder. His eyes narrowed at the stranger, cautious but not hostile. Mrs. Harris straightened from the porch, hammer in hand, and glanced at him with the practiced wariness of someone who had seen plenty of visitors over the years. "Can we help you, Mr. Harris asked, his voice steady despite the strain of physical labor. Jackson shook his head quickly. "No, I wanted to see if you folks needed any help." He cleared his throat, suddenly aware that the Harrises had no idea who he was, just another neighbor, another face among the ruins left by the storm. "This storm, it was bad. I have crews that I can fix all this for you. But I didn't want to overstep." Mrs. Harris offered a tired but polite smile. "We've managed worse storms," she said, voice calm and unwavering. "We don't mind doing a little hard work ourselves." Mr. Harris nodded, his grip firm on the timber. "We've done this before. It takes time, but it's worth it." Jackson studied them, genuinely impressed. These weren't just people surviving, they were thriving in the face of disaster, driven by years of experience and an unshakable sense of pride. He could see the sag of Mr. Harris' shoulders, the fine lines of strain around Mrs. Harris' eyes, yet they moved with a rhythm that spoke of decades of shared labor. Every lift of timber, every measured strike of the hammer, seemed to tell a story of perseverance and unspoken love. For a moment, he stood in silence, watching them work. The wind tugged at his coat, carrying the smell of wet earth and pine needles, mingling with the faint scent of tar from the temporary roof patch. He realized he wasn't here to show generosity, he was here to witness determination. Still, a nagging worry tugged at him. The storm's aftermath left unstable beams and slippery mud. One wrong step could lead to serious injury. "Look," Jackson said finally, stepping closer, "I can lend a hand if you'd like. Just so no one gets hurt. You've already done an incredible job, but this is dangerous work alone." Mrs. Harris set down her hammer, exchanging a glance with her husband. They both understood what Jackson was offering, not charity, but support. Pride battled practicality, and for a moment, the air was thick with silent debate. Finally, Mr. Harris gave a slow nod. "All right, one hand wouldn't hurt, but we do it our way." Jackson smiled, feeling the weight of unspoken respect settle between them. Together, they would face the storm's aftermath, not as strangers and benefactor, but as people working side by side. By mid-afternoon, the sun had begun to break through the gray clouds, casting a warm glow across the mud-slicked yard. The Harrises had made impressive progress. The roof was partially patched, the porch beams reinforced, and the scattered debris was stacked neatly along the edges of the yard. Jackson had joined them, carrying heavy boards and hauling buckets of water away from the flooded garden. Despite the exhaustion visible on all their faces, there was a quiet satisfaction in their movements, a rhythm born of shared effort and determination. "Careful with that beam," Jackson cautioned as Mr. Harris lifted a soaked plank onto the roof. "It's slippery. I've handled worse," Mr. Harris replied, his voice steady, almost proud. "We've lived on this land long enough to know how to handle a storm." Mrs. Harris wiped sweat from her forehead, her hands raw from hammering, and gave Jackson a faint smile. "You're strong," she said, "but strength doesn't replace care." Jackson nodded, silently acknowledging the truth in her words. He had arrived with the intention of helping, but as he worked alongside them, he realized this wasn't just manual labor, it was a testament to resilience, endurance, and pride. Every plank lifted, every nail hammered, was a declaration that they would not be broken by a storm, no matter how powerful. The wind picked up again, whipping loose debris across the yard. Jackson glanced at the Harrises, who were working steadily despite the gusts. His heart thumped nervously. It wasn't just the physical danger, it was the thought of them pushing themselves too far. He knew he had to intervene before someone got seriously hurt. "All stop now." Jackson's voice rang across the yard, firm and commanding. Both Mr. and Mrs. Harris froze mid-motion, eyes wide in surprise. A plank tipped dangerously on the roof, and Mrs. Harris instinctively held onto the rafters. "What? Why?" Mr. Harris asked, his voice a mix of confusion and mild indignation. Jackson walked closer, his boots sinking into the mud, and held up his hands in reassurance. "I know you're capable," he said, "and I respect that more than anything. But this is dangerous. One wrong step and someone could get seriously hurt. You've done more than anyone could have expected already. It's time to pause before something irreversible happens." Mrs. Harris exchanged a glance with her husband, the unspoken bond between them clear even through the tension. They understood his concern, even if it stung their pride. "We're not done yet," she said softly, "but we trust you." Jackson smiled, relief washing over him. "Then let's finish this, together, safely." He handed Mr. Harris a sturdier board, and Mrs. Harris accepted his help in lifting a heavy section of the roof. The dynamic shifted, it was no longer about stubborn determination alone. It was teamwork, respect, and shared purpose. As they worked side by side, the farmhouse slowly regained its shape, stronger and more secure than before. Jackson realized that helping didn't diminish their pride, it amplified it. They weren't just rebuilding a house, they were reinforcing the legacy of a lifetime. By the time the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky with streaks of orange and gold, the old farmhouse stood resilient. The Harrises leaned against the porch, exhausted but triumphant, and Jackson stepped back, quietly proud. The storm had tested them, but together, they had proven that resilience and unity could rebuild anything, even when the odds seemed impossible. By sunset, the sky over Harper's Ridge was a blaze of warm colors, orange, pink, and soft violet melting together over the flattened fields and scattered debris. The storm had long passed, leaving behind a landscape scarred but alive. Jackson Reed stepped back from the farmhouse, boots caked in mud, chest heaving slightly from the day's labor. Beside him, Mr. and Mrs. Harris leaned on the freshly reinforced porch railing, their hands raw and faces streaked with sweat and grime. Yet despite the fatigue, there was a sense of triumph in their eyes, a quiet joy that only comes from surviving, enduring, and rebuilding. Jackson let out a long breath, allowing the tension he hadn't realized he was holding to leave his body. He had come intending to simply observe, maybe lend a hand if necessary. But he had left with something far more profound, a sense of connection to this resilient couple and the land they cherished. "You've done something remarkable here," he said, his voice soft but full of genuine admiration. Mr. Harris wiped his hands on a rag, shaking his head with a humble grin. "We've just done what anyone would, I reckon," he said. But Jackson saw through the modesty. These were people who had faced the storms of life for decades, literal and figurative, and still refused to give up. Mrs. Harris smiled at Jackson, the lines around her eyes deepened by laughter and years of labor. "We couldn't have done it without you," she said. Her words were quiet, yet filled with sincerity. "You could have taken over completely, but instead, you worked beside us. That means more than you know." Jackson felt a lump rise in his throat. He had spent his life surrounded by wealth, power, and influence, yet none of it had ever given him the fulfillment he felt in that moment. There was something irreplaceable about hands joined in shared effort, about pride tempered by teamwork, and about a connection forged not by status but by respect. The three of them stood there for a long moment, watching the wind stir the remaining clouds and the soft golden light touch the repaired roof. Then Mr. Harris broke the silence. "Coffee?" he asked, voice hoarse but warm. "It's not much, but it's ours, and I think we all could use it." Jackson laughed, the sound feeling lighter than it had in weeks. "I'd like that," he said, and together, they walked inside. The smell of strong, bitter coffee filled the small kitchen, mingling with the faint scent of wet wood and earth still clinging to their clothes. Conversation flowed easily, filled with stories of past storms, family memories, and shared laughter at small mishaps during the rebuild. As twilight deepened, Jackson stepped back onto the porch, looking over the fields beyond. He realized that wealth could buy many things, but not this: the warmth of connection, the joy of helping without expectation, and the satisfaction of preserving a legacy built by hard work and love. The Harrises were more than neighbors, they were teachers of resilience, courage, and dignity. That evening, as stars began to shimmer over Harper's Ridge, Jackson felt something settle deep in his chest, a quiet, enduring peace. The farmhouse stood strong, the garden tended, and a bond had been forged that no storm could ever undo. Sometimes, he realized, the greatest riches weren't measured in dollars or acres, but in trust, respect, and the shared triumph over life's fiercest trials.